one more speaker I want to go to for another similar success story. This about reining in the power of one of the forces that is most destructively corrupting our elections, super PACs. Anna Kellar is the executive director of Democracy Maine, a hybrid organization that brings together the League of Women Voters of Maine, Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, and Maine Students Vote. Anna grew up in Maine before earning a BA in political science from Yale University and a master's in conflict studies from the London School of Economics. Their early career focused on democratic transitions and anti-corruption in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. At Democracy Maine, Anna has led successful legislative and ballot initiative campaigns to expand ranked choice voting and small donor funding programs, pass the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and modernize Maine's election and voter registration systems. So we would love to know what's worked in all of those successes, but including reining in the super PACs. Anna Kellar.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to talk a little bit about this work, and I think this fits in well with what I've heard from folks so far about how this is work that builds on itself over time. So in 1996, when I was 6 years old, the people of Maine passed a referendum to create our clean election system. And so clean elections is what we call our small donor public funding system. It means that people who run for the state legislature or governor in Maine can choose to use the clean election system. It means that they can qualify for public funding to run their campaign. They have to not take any money from special interest from big donors. What they do is they have to collect $5 qualifying contributions from Maine voters or voters in their district if they're running for the legislature. And then with that show of community support, they qualify for a limited amount of money to run their campaign. They're not allowed to raise or spend any more than that. And this program has meant that people who otherwise would have been excluded from running for office, who are from all different working class backgrounds, we see that for people, anyone who for whom fundraising would be an obstacle to getting involved or to running a successful campaign, those people have a real pathway toward participating and being elected. We've seen over the course of the last now almost 30 years, and this we are now at 25 years since the first candidates ran using clean elections. Because we've had this program in place for a long time, we've been able to see what parts of it have worked, what parts of it the results are a little bit more mixed, and where there are gaps. And I got involved in this work in 2014 after the Supreme Court, first in Citizens United and then in a subsequent decision, made a piece of the Maine Clean Elections program not viable anymore. It took away matching funds because the Supreme Court, as part of saying that money is speech.
Anna, I've lost your audio. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but
Yeah, we lost her.
How is it now?
It's good.
Sometimes those AirPods just drop. Um, if you were running as a clean elections candidate and your opponent wasn't, the opponent raised more money, or even if a PAC spent money on that candidate's behalf, you would automatically qualify for matching funds, and it kept it at a level playing field. That trigger, that idea that you would automatically get more money if your opponent spent more, that's what the Supreme Court struck down in Arizona, where they had a similar system, and then in Maine. Without that, clean elections candidates were getting outspent and fewer people were choosing to use the system. For a long time, from 2000 to about 2010, we had over 80% of candidates that used clean elections. It had to be a voluntary system, but we saw that there was high participation, including really cross-partisan high participation. After the Supreme Court, that got much harder. And so I got involved in a second referendum to go back to the voters to create a supplemental funding program. So it just meant that there was another way for candidates to stay competitive. I loved being part of that campaign because ballot initiatives can be a wonderful thing when you're saying, in the face of the Supreme Court, saying something that seems so illogical and so counter to how we want our democracy to function. I was able to go to people and say, would you like to do something about this? Well, I actually have something very concrete that you can do. You can help collect signatures at your polling place on election day. We can get this on the ballot. We can pass this law. And then we'll have actually fixed a problem here. We won't have to hope that our elected officials do it. We're actually fixing it ourselves. And so that direct democracy is a really powerful thing and a really powerful organizing tool that I'm very grateful that we have. Since we had that campaign, which we won in 2015, we've seen that the rates of participation for clean elections have gone back up, and we've really stabilized at about 60% of candidates use it. And so it's become such a normal part of life in Maine that it is seen as completely normal, and in some ways has even been co-opted by the partisan political structure. People just assume most candidates will use clean elections, and then, PACs raise money outside of that. If you're running for leadership, maybe you still have to do real fundraising. We've seen many fewer people use it for governor because they don't like being cut off from the national sources of big money if they have ambitions. And so we've seen where it helps to get people into the game. It really has helped in that way. We have a much more diverse legislature than we would otherwise, and it's really launched the careers of many people who wouldn't have been able to run otherwise. But it hasn't actually cut out big money. And so when we look at what's needed, we're still trying to face, and this is where I'm less positive, and sorry for putting a sour note in the otherwise story of a success here, but this is, I think, want to be honest about where there are things that are imperfect as well. And so what we're finding is that um, without the ability to rein in the super PACs, we're not really going to deal with the underlying problem of corruption and imperfect representation. Like we're seeing, if you have a lot of money, you will still have more power and more voice.
Lost audio and video now. Got video back.
Maybe this will work.
Got audio back.
All right. I'm gonna just say one more thing here, which is that when we had so we've been dealing with the same problem that people around the country have, which is that the Supreme Court is standing squarely in the path between us and reform. And so we've only got a couple of ways to go around that. We do feel like clean elections, public funding programs make a real difference, and they make especially a difference the more local that you get, which is why that we're looking at expanding to county level government. And so I was very interested in the story about the death penalty, because what we're finding is that there is a real need for these programs and anti-corruption measures in our county government, which is where all of our criminal justice system is. Our DAs, our sheriff, our county commissioners, these are incredibly important positions that almost nobody pays any attention to or can run for. So we're looking to expand clean elections at that level. We're also looking for ways to build the movement that ultimately gets us where we need to go, which is, I think, either a constitutional amendment that reins in money in politics, Supreme Court reform that reins in money in politics, whatever the mechanism that gets us there, it's going to require a real vision of what our democracy should be looking like and what the role of money in that needs to be. And so, the reason I've been skirting a little bit around talking directly about super PACs is that the referendum that we passed last year overwhelmingly to rein in super PACs was just struck down in the district court. And so it's yet another example of the courts getting in the way of what people really want to see here. And so what I'm looking at now is how do we keep building a movement that is not just in the courts or in any one particular policy or campaign, but that allows us to be nimble? How can we talk about the millionaire's tax, which is a thing that my organization testified in favor of in Maine for the first time ever this year? Because we're seeing the way that the impact of big money is showing up in so many ways. And if we can't get at the campaign spending, maybe we can get at the source of it, which is the income inequality. So I think what we're finding is that, yes, we've been able to make some success with these specific reforms, but ultimately what we've had to do is to continue being very nimble about the policy itself and focusing on the organizing and the movement building.